Welcome to Online Storytime with Mrs. Venable. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi everyone, welcome back to week 6 of Online Storytime with me, Mrs. Venable. I cannot believe we're entering our last month of the school year and getting ready for summer already. I decided to film on my back porch today because it's such a nice day and I'm enjoying the weather, and I hope you guys are getting outside too. I know all the teachers at MOPS are so proud of all you guys have done to keep up with your online learning, and I hope that you guys are ready to finish the school year strong. Today we're going to be reading one of my favorite books. It's called My Rotten Redheaded Older Brother by Patricia Polacco. It's all about a little girl named Tricia and her older brother Richie and their relationship, and he is not always the nicest big brother. I can't wait to share it with you. This video is being produced with permission from Simon & Schuster, the publisher of our story. Before we read our story, though, I want to share some awesome work that I received from students after last week's Storytime, Mother Bruce. Thanks so much for tuning in to Storytime. Last week, our story was Mother Bruce by Ryan T. Higgins, and for your extension activity, I challenged you to watch a short video called Studio Time with Ryan Higgins. After watching the video, I asked you to describe Ryan Higgins and provide evidence from the video or his book to support your description. I also asked you to draw a picture of his character Bruce using the instructions from the video. I had a lot of great submissions and I want to share a couple of them with you now. First, Sophie from 2nd grade wrote, Ryan T. Higgins is fun and silly. The PJs he is wearing are silly. Great job providing evidence, Sophie, and I love your picture of Bruce. Samuel from 1st grade wrote that he thought Ryan Higgins was silly, funny, and happy. He said he was only drawing bears when he said he would draw other stuff. His bear is funny in his book. He wore a suit to bed and pajamas during the day. Great evidence, Samuel. Last, Erin from 2nd grade submitted this picture that she drew. Here we have Bruce cooking on a stovetop and being very surprised when his goslings hatched and said, Mama! And of course Bruce says, What? Geese? Great job, Erin. Thank you to all the students that submitted awesome work to me. Let's talk about a few questions to get ready for our story. Remember, you can pause the video to discuss these answers with a family member or to think about them in your head. First, do you have any brothers or sisters? If so, describe them. You can talk about what they look like, how old they are, whether they're older or younger than you, and other details like that. Next, look at the front cover and read the title of this book. Our story this week is My Rotten Redheaded Older Brother by Patricia Polacco. What can you infer about the relationship between this brother and sister? Do you think they get along? Why or why not? Last, we have some vocabulary words that are going to come up in our story that I want to make sure you understand. First, the narrator will use the words babushka and bubby. These are words that mean grandmother. The narrator's grandmother in this story is from the Ukraine. Next, you'll hear the word rhubarb. Rhubarb is a plant that has large green leaves with thick pink or red stems that is cooked and used in pies and jams. Rhubarb also tastes sour when it is raw. So be sure to look for these words as we read our story. My brother and our mother and I all lived with my grandparents on their farm in Union City, Michigan. Now my babushka, my grandmother, knew lots of things. She knew just how to tell a good story. She knew how to make ordinary things magical. And she knew how to make the best chocolate cake in Michigan. After she told my brother and me a grand tale from her homeland, we'd always ask, Bubby, is that true? She'd answer, Of course it's true, but it may not have happened. Then she'd laugh. Now, I knew that she loved me all right, but I couldn't quite understand how she could even like my older brother, Richard. He had orange hair that was like wire. He was covered in freckles and looked like a weasel with glasses.
The one thing that my Bubby didn't seem to know was how perfectly awful my brother really was. Mind you, he was always nice whenever she was around us, but as soon as she'd leave, he would do something terrible to me and laugh. There were so many things that I couldn't stand about him. The worst was that he was always telling me he could do just about everything better than I. Bet I can pick more blackberries than you can, he jeered at me one day. No, you can't. Can so? Cannot. Can, he whispered. Not, I said louder. Can. He whispered so low that I could hardly hear him. Not, I screamed back. We both picked berries for most of the afternoon. Well, he upped and did it. He not only picked more berries than I, he set a record that wasn't even challenged for the next 10 years. You make me sick, Richard Barber, I yelled at him. Then he smiled that smile that only a rotten, red-headed older brother could smile. I guess I would have to face it. He could run the fastest, climb the highest, throw the farthest, sit the longest, get the dirtiest, burp the loudest, and spit the farthest. He had no equal, certainly not me. And I'm 4 years older than you, always have been and always will be, he sneered. There had to be something I could do that he couldn't. Then an inspired thought comforted me like a fresh breeze on a hot summer day. "Oh, Richie," I cooed as I stood next to the rhubarb bushes. "Do you like rhubarb?" "No," he said. "It's the sourest stuff on this planet." Now I knew at long last that I had him. "I bet I can eat more of this raw rhubarb than you can without getting the puckers," I challenged. "I don't think so." "I do." "I don't," he said, narrowing his eyes. "I do," I insisted. "Don't," he hissed, looking smug. "Do," I said furiously as I grabbed the first stalk and started chewing it almost down to the leaf. When I couldn't get one more sour bite into my mouth, he was still eating with relish. "I thought you said you don't like rhubarb," I said through pursed lips. "I don't like it. I love it," he announced as he popped the last stalk into his mouth. I was so mad I couldn't even feel how my belly was starting to ache. "I can't stand you, Richard Barber. I double dog can't stand you," I screamed as I went into the house to be consoled by my grandmother. "Yeah, and I'm 4 years older than you too, you little twerp. Always have been and always will be," he called after me. Then he laughed that rotten, red-headed older brother laugh. That night at dinner I could hardly eat. "Have you been eating angry apples again, child?" Bubby asked as she sliced me a huge wedge of rhubarb pie. "I baked your favorite." Richard gave me one of his extra rotten, weasel-eyed, greeny-toothed grins. At bedtime, my Bubby came and sat on the edge of my bed like she did every night. "Look, a falling star," she said. We watched it streak across the sky. Then she spit twice between her fingers and gave her chest a loud slap. "Why'd you do that, Bubby?" I asked. "I was making a wish. Didn't you know that wishes on falling stars come true?" At last I knew how I was going to get back at my brother. For the longest time I watched the dark sky until I saw a star shoot across the night. Then I spit between my 2 fingers and slapped my chest. It was done. My wish was to do something, anything, better than my brother. I'd show him. The next morning all I could think about was my wish. I was thinking about it so hard that I almost didn't notice the wagons and trucks pulling into the field down the road near Four Corners. "A traveling carnival!" my brother shouted as he ran toward me. "They're setting up right here in our field. Bet I can eat more hot dogs than you can," he teased. He was already starting it, but this time I was going to do something so incredible that even he would have to sit up and take notice. I had a star wish. I'd show my rotten red-headed older brother all right. That night I ran straight for the merry-go-round. We must have taken 50 turns on that carousel. But then my brother got off. I stayed on. I went around and around and around. "I knew I could do this longer than you," I shouted to my brother, feeling proud, but just a bit dizzy. "Tricia," I heard my Bubby call out, "get off from that thing. It's time to go home." The last thing I remembered was stepping off from the platform. Next thing I knew, I woke up with Bubby sitting on the edge of my bed. Mom and Grandpa were there too. "You gave us all a fright," Mama said. "How do you feel?" "What happened?" I asked. "You fell," my rotten red-headed older brother announced with the biggest grin on his face. "I don't know what we would have done," my Bubby said softly. "Your brother carried you all the way home, and then he had to run to get Dr. Lee." "You had to have stitches. I watched it all," he said excitedly. "You fell off the merry-go-round right into some pop bottles," my Gramps added. "You even passed out," my brother chirped. "Looks like you finally did something special." It was from that exact moment that our relationship changed somehow. "Thanks, Richie," I said to him. "What's a big brother for anyway?" he said, blushing. That night we were all out in the yard. On hot Michigan nights it was my family's custom to sleep outside where it was cool. "Look at those stars," Bubby said quietly. "Wishes are funny, aren't they?" I said. "Sometimes they come true differently than you think they will." "That's why you have to be very careful what you wish for. It just may come true," Bubby said. Then she squeezed both of our hands. "Hang on to the grass," she whispered. "Why, Bub?" my brother asked. "Because if we don't, we might float up to the stars." Then she leaned over and kissed us both 3 times. "I kiss your eyes and I hold both of your hearts in my good keeping. And this night I thank God that I walked this earth with both of you. Amen." Then we all just lay on our blankets in the gentle summer night. "I'll always be 4 years older than you, though," my brother whispered softly. Then he smiled. All of us held one another's hands, and then we all drifted off to sleep. One really cool thing about this story is that it is actually a true story. It's all about our author Patricia and her brother Richard when they were growing up together. She includes some photographs of them as children that I wanted to share with you. Now that we've read our story, let's talk about a couple of after reading questions. The main characters in this book, Tricia and Richie, are a brother and sister who are constantly competing. What contest do they have in this book? Who usually wins the contest? Next, reread this sentence from the book. "You make me sick, Richard Barber," I yelled at him. How does Tricia feel when she says these words? Which words in the sentence helped you understand how she felt? Last, how does Tricia and Richie's relationship change from the beginning of the story to the end? What event caused it to change? We also have a new extension activity challenge for you to try this week. Our story this week was a true story written and illustrated by Patricia Polacco. It was all about her childhood growing up with her family, including her brother Richie and her grandmother. For this week's extension activity, I'm challenging you to watch the attached Patricia Polacco author video called Fire Talking and answer the questions below. According to the video, what is fire talking? Have your parents, grandparents, or other members of your family ever told you a story about their childhood? If not, ask them to tell you one of their stories this week. Retell and illustrate their childhood story. You can share your writing and illustrations with me by email at venableb@russellcsd.net, or you can post your work on Google Classroom. Thank you so much for joining me at Storytime today. Remember to look for new Storytime videos every Wednesday on this YouTube channel, on your teacher's Google Classroom, or the Mount Olive Primary School Facebook page. Next week, we'll be reading Stella Luna by Janelle Cannon. Happy reading! Love, Miss Venable.